And the railway manias of the 1830s and 1860s were roughly comparable in size if you look at the economy as a whole. And the difference between them is that the mania of the 1830s is successful. So capital investment that went into it was equivalent to about $2 trillion for the United States. Remember, the Obama administration stimulus plan is about $800 billion. So this is 2.5 times as large. Spread over a slightly longer period of time, spread about, say, 6 years as opposed to 2 years. Okay? So the gigantic investment, okay? And it's widely speculative. So there are lots of opponents in the 1830s. Canals are concerned about competition. Stagecoaches are concerned about competition. Inns are concerned about competition. Aristocrats are concerned about losing their hunting grounds. Universities, Cambridge and Oxford and also Eton, opposing railways because of fears of moral corruption of their students. Lots and lots of opposition, okay, to railways. And lots of skepticism, informed skepticism. John Stuart Mill, the famous economist and philosopher of that period, he was a great supporter of railways. He felt they were very productive, infrastructure, very good for society, but he thought that investors were going to lose their shares. They did. Okay? They actually succeeded. And interestingly enough, and it's totally almost invisible in the literature, and the fact that this was a wild, crazy kind of speculation which succeeded seems to have been forgotten. But it was very important, it really influenced very heavily the attitude of investors just before the great railway mania of the 1840s. It was the success of the earlier mania that inspired them to pour these astronomical sums of money into the further expansion, which this time turned out to ruin them. To give you a sense of what happened, here are British railways at the start of the railway mania of the 1830s, maybe around 1833 or so. Well, let's see, we don't have a laser pointer, do we? Is this a pointer? Doesn't seem to be, sorry. Okay, so I have to talk about it. So here is a map of England and Scotland, England, Wales and Scotland. Ireland is off to the left. Ireland has practically no railways, so nothing to worry about. Railways here are in red, okay? And you see a few of them, okay? Very short ones. At this stage, Britain has a grand total of maybe 300 miles of railways. They're kind of short links providing transport primarily for coal, okay, over short distances, with one exception, one sterling exception, namely the connection which you can sort of see there between Liverpool and Manchester. So if you go up the coast, there's the top of Wales, you can recognize it, and go inland, you can see this kind of bit of red line. This is Liverpool, Manchester, and a couple of branches, about 30 miles, plus some branches, maybe 50 miles total. Okay, this is a very successful passenger steam railway. So these are isolated railways built to solve local transportation problems. Okay. Now, during the railway mania of the 1830s, British investors decide to grow this network, to grow this set of railways tenfold. They go out and get permission from Parliament to build over 2,000 miles of railway. And they build it, even though there are very high economic times. Here is the result. Here is the network that results by early 1840s. So at this stage, you have a recognizable national network. So it's no longer a bunch of isolated short-haul lines. Now you have a lot of sort of trunk railways connecting major cities, and then of course you have lots of branches. So now you have over 2,000 miles of rail. Obviously there are some gaps. You see that you can go up to the industrial Midlands, say from London, but you cannot yet get up to Scotland. So up in Scotland, up in the north, you see there is a link between Edinburgh on the east coast, capital of Scotland, and Glasgow, the big industrial harbour city on the west coast, about 40 miles apart, but you cannot go by rail from Scotland to England. Okay? But you pretty much have a national network, and most people at that period think that this is it. Essentially, the canal network of Britain was about 2,000 miles. Okay? Here it was built over preceding 80 years or so, again in a few bursts of enthusiasm. It was in a canal mania, but a very small one. Now a new technology has shown up, railways, and was built to something comparable in extent to canals. And most people say, well, okay, that's done. That's all that remains to be done. Okay? We don't have to worry about it, except maybe for a few connect to Scotland. Well, but then Great Railway Mania arrives, and at the end of the Great Railway Mania, now all these gaps get filled in, and the network is extended. But still, you can see that the big step was really the earlier one, going from this set of very short haul links, okay, scattered all over the nation, towards something that's beginning to look like a national network. That was a great achievement, and that was really wild. I mean, people like John Stuart Mill, they were wrong to be skeptical about industrial prospects, but there was no clear way to prove they were going to be wrong. Those only events proved them to be wrong. There was no good prediction technology for demand. There was no good way to predict costs, even. Okay? Promoters, of course, were painting very rosy prospects, but how could you be sure that they would come true? Okay? So, anyway, but they go on, they build this network, and it succeeds. So it's not easy, if you just simply see something that looks crazy, but suddenly valuations skyrocket, it doesn't mean it's bound to fail. There's at least one example where it succeeded, in face of extreme skepticism. Okay? Moreover, it succeeds in spite of very basic misunderstandings. So one of the interesting things, was, I mentioned Brin and Page, kind of thinking that advertising was not going to be a viable business, and that search was not a viable business. Many other people thinking like that. Lots and lots of examples, even worse examples from the railway era, where people misunderstand how technology is going to be used, and they keep misunderstanding it even after it succeeds. Well, so what do I mean by it? Okay, so a bunch of examples. One is when railways were being first promoted and pushed, say in the early 1830s, there was great concern among opponents that railways were going to decrease the number of horses. That the noble art of horse breeding would decline, that would have horrible effects on the kind of recreational fox hunting, but even more seriously, that would have horrible effects on the military, the power of England. Because they felt they had great cavalry, which depended on having good horses in the country, and of course if horse breeding dies out, well, what would cavalry do? Okay. Now, the proponents of railways, they sort of admitted that yes, horses, the number of horses would decline, but on the other hand, they said to feed a horse takes as much ground as suffices to feed 8 people. So if we can get rid of horses, then we no longer will have to push our young to emigrate to the rebellious colonies across the Atlantic or to Australia or other places. So therefore you can support a larger population, you can live better. Okay. It turned out both sides turned out to be wrong. Railways stimulated demand for horses. Okay. Why? Well, for several reasons. One is they stimulated the economy as a whole, but more important, the railways were great once you got either the people or the goods to the rails. But you still had a first mile problem, which of course we suffer in telecom today. How do you get to those fast rails, or the expensive rails? Okay? Needed horses.